December 1944. The forests of the Ardennes. 20 degrees below freezing. General George S. Patton, the loudest, the meanest, the most feared American commander in Europe, was walking through a field of frozen corpses. He had seen 10,000 dead men. He had ordered the deaths of thousands more. He had once said war was the greatest thing a man could experience. But on this day, in the snow, he stopped walking, because lying in the snow was a dead German soldier, a boy no older than 17, and clutched in his frozen hand was a photograph. What Patton did next, he never spoke about publicly. He wrote it in his private diary. His aide wrote about it in his memoirs, and the men who were with him that day carried the moment to their graves. This is the story of the day Patton stopped being a general and remembered he was a man. The winter of 1944 was the worst Europe had seen in 40 years. Temperatures dropped to -20. Soldiers froze to their rifles. Wounded men died not from their wounds, but from the cold that came after. In December, the Germans launched their final desperate offensive, what we now call the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler threw everything he had left into the forests of Belgium and Luxembourg. Old men, wounded veterans, and boys. So many boys. By this point in the war, Germany had run out of soldiers. The Wehrmacht was being rebuilt with 16-year-olds. Children, pulled from school benches, handed a Panzerfaust, and pushed into the snow to die for a regime that was already collapsing. On the other side of the line, General George Patton was driving his Third Army harder than any American force in history. In just 48 hours, he had pivoted 100,000 men 90 degrees north and marched them 100 miles through a blizzard to relieve the besieged town of Bastogne. It was the greatest logistical feat in American military history. And Patton, the general who prayed for clear skies and got them, was at the absolute peak of his power. He was also, his aide would later write, the loneliest man in the war. On a gray morning in late December, Patton ordered his driver to stop the jeep. He had been touring forward positions all morning, visiting the wounded, inspecting captured equipment, barking orders at officers who looked like they hadn't slept in a week. Now he wanted to walk. His aide, Colonel Charles Codman, climbed out with him. So did a young soldier, a private, no more than 19, who had been assigned as their security escort that day. The boy was new, fresh from the States. He had never seen combat before this morning. They walked across a field where the previous night's battle had ended. The Germans had attacked. The Americans had held. The bodies lay where they fell, half buried in fresh snow. Patton walked slowly, hands behind his back, his pearl-handled revolvers gleaming at his hips. He looked at the German dead the way a man looks at a problem he has solved. Cold, detached, professional. Then he saw the young American private, the one assigned to guard him, kneeling in the snow next to a body. The boy was crying. Codman stiffened. He knew Patton's reputation. 18 months earlier, Patton had slapped a soldier in Sicily for showing weakness in a hospital tent. The incident had nearly destroyed his career. Codman braced himself for what was about to happen. But Patton didn't shout. He didn't slap. He didn't speak at all. He walked over, and he knelt down beside the boy. Before I tell you what Patton saw in the snow that morning, what was clutched in that dead German boy's hand, if stories like this matter to you, the small human moments hidden inside the biggest war in history, take 1 second to subscribe. Every video we make is built from real diaries, real letters, real witnesses. The stories the textbooks left out, and what comes next is one of them. Now, let's go back to that field. The dead soldier was young, younger than the American crying over him. 16, maybe 17. His uniform was too big for his body. His helmet had rolled away in the snow. He had been shot once, through the chest. In his right hand, frozen solid, he was holding a photograph. Patton reached down and gently, slowly, like he was afraid to break something, pried the photograph from the boy's fingers. It was a picture of a woman, middle-aged, plain dress, standing in front of a small house with 2 children, a girl and a younger boy. On the back, written in pencil, were 3 words in German. Komm bald heim. Come home soon. Patton stared at the photograph for a long time. The young American private was still crying, softly now, embarrassed, trying to stop. He had killed the German boy, his first kill of the war. He had thought it would feel different. He had thought he would feel proud. And then he had seen the photograph fall from the dead boy's hand. Codman later wrote that Patton's face changed in that moment. The hardness left it. The mask he wore, the swagger, the profanity, the legendary fury, slipped off for just a few seconds. And underneath was just a 60-year-old man, kneeling in the snow, holding a dead child's photograph of his mother. Patton turned to the young American soldier, and he said something that Codman wrote down word for word that night in his journal, because he knew he had just witnessed something nobody would believe. Patton looked at the young private. The boy was 19 years old. The dead German was maybe 16. They could have been brothers. And Patton said, quietly, "Son, that boy had a mother who is going to wait for the rest of her life for a letter that will never come. You didn't do this. The men who started this war did this. Don't ever forget that. But don't ever stop crying for him either. The day you stop is the day you become like them." The private nodded. He couldn't speak. Patton stood up slowly. His knees ached from the cold, and he did something nobody who served with him had ever seen before. He took the photograph. He slipped it carefully inside the dead German boy's coat, over his heart. Then he buttoned the coat closed against the wind. He turned to Codman and said only one sentence. "Find his unit. Make sure he gets buried with his name." Then he walked back to the jeep. He didn't speak for the rest of the drive. Codman wrote that Patton's eyes were wet, but he wasn't sure if it was the wind or something else. That night, in his private diary, the one that wasn't released until decades after his death, Patton wrote a single line about the day. It was unlike anything else he ever wrote. "I am tired of seeing dead boys. The Germans send us their children to kill. God forgive us all." The Battle of the Bulge ended a few weeks later. The Americans won. Patton drove his army into Germany. By May 1945, the war in Europe was over. But the man who came back from that war was not the same man who had gone in. Friends noticed it. His wife noticed it. Even his enemies noticed it. The legendary fury was still there, the speeches, the swagger, the medals on his chest. But something underneath had cracked. He drank more. He slept less. He spoke about death the way other men spoke about the weather. 11 months after that morning in the snow, Patton was dead. Killed in a car accident on a quiet road in Germany at age 60. He never spoke publicly about the German boy with the photograph. He never told the story in interviews. He never wrote about it in any of his public letters. But Colonel Charles Codman remembered. And 40 years later, when he was an old man himself, he wrote the story down. Because he said the world deserved to know that George Patton, the meanest general America ever produced, had once knelt in the snow and wept silently for a dead enemy child. The young American private who was there that day, we don't know his name. He went back to his unit. He kept fighting. He may have survived the war. He may not have. There are millions of stories like his that history forgot. But somewhere, in the records of the German War Graves Commission, there is the grave of a 16-year-old boy from Bavaria, killed in the Ardennes, December 1944, buried with a photograph of his mother, tucked over his heart by the most American general of the 20th century. His mother never stopped waiting for him to come home. If this story moved you the way it moved me when I first read it, do me one small favor. Drop a comment below, just one word. The name of someone in your family who fought in a war. A grandfather, a great uncle, a name we can remember together. Because that's what this channel is for. Not the generals, not the battles. The names history almost forgot. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And the next time someone tells you that great men don't cry, tell them about a snow-covered field in Belgium, where the toughest general America ever made knelt down beside a boy who wasn't his enemy anymore. Just a son who didn't get to go home.